His hand was around my throat before I even saw him coming. One moment I was standing at the edge of the festival crowd, holding a paper cup of lemonade, watching the lights strung between the oak trees sway in the August breeze, thinking, and this is the part that breaks me open every time I remember it, thinking that I was okay, that I had made it. That the woman standing in that warm evening crowd in her yellow sundress with her natural hair loose around her shoulders was someone who had survived the unsurvivable and come out the other side into something that felt, cautiously, like peace. And then Marcus Webb's hand closed around my throat. Not grabbing exactly. Worse than grabbing. The specific grip of a man who has done this before and knows precisely how much pressure communicates what he wants to communicate, which was, I still own you. I will always own you. You do not get to stand in a crowd in a yellow dress feeling okay. You do not get to escape what I am. The lemonade hit the ground. I didn't drop it. My hand just stopped functioning. The way your body stops cooperating with ordinary tasks when it recognizes a threat it has spent 3 years being conditioned by. My vision went strange at the edges. The festival sounds, the music, the laughter, the children somewhere nearby on a bouncy castle became distant and wrong, like hearing the world through water. Simone, he said, my name in his mouth. He said it the way he always said it, the way that made it sound like a verdict. Like something he had already decided about me and was simply reminding me of. Did you think I wouldn't find you? I could feel my pulse against his hand. I could feel the people around us. The festival crowd that had, in the space of 3 seconds, rearranged itself into the shape of bystanders. That specific configuration of people who have registered something wrong and are calculating the cost of involvement. I could feel all of this, and I could also feel, underneath the terror, the specific cold clarity of a woman who has survived this man for 3 years and knows exactly what comes after the hand around the throat if she doesn't do something. And then I felt something else. A stillness, not my stillness, not the survival stillness I had learned to inhabit, the stillness of making yourself small and quiet and non-threatening. A different kind. The stillness that precedes rather than follows. The stillness of something that is about to happen. I became aware of a man standing to my left. I don't know how I noticed him, given that Marcus Webb's hand was on my throat and my vision was compromised. But I noticed him the way you notice a change in air pressure, the way you notice a temperature drop, not with your eyes first, but with some older, deeper sense that predates sight. He was Korean. He was tall. He was wearing a dark shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows, and he was very, very still. He was looking at Marcus's hand on my throat. And then, with movements so deliberate they seemed almost slow, he reached up to his right hand and began removing his rings. One by one. He had 4 of them. Heavy things, dark metal, the kind that exist in a different category from decorative jewelry. He removed them with the unhurried certainty of a man performing a ritual he has performed before and will perform correctly this time as all the times before. He placed them, carefully, in the breast pocket of his shirt. He never looked at Marcus's face. He was looking at Marcus's hand. Marcus felt it. I watched it happen. The grip on my throat didn't loosen, not yet, but Marcus's attention shifted the way a predator's does when it becomes aware that the dynamic of the environment has changed. He looked to his left. He saw the man. He saw the rings coming off. The hand around my throat dropped. If this opening just stopped your breath, good. That means you're exactly where this story needs you. Subscribe to this channel right now before we go another word further. Drop your name and your city in the comments below. We want to know where in the world you are watching from. People from across this entire country and beyond are here for these stories, and every single comment matters. Now, let's go back. Let's go all the way back to the beginning of Simone Carter's story, because what happened at that festival was not the beginning. It was the moment the beginning finally ended. My name is Simone Carter. I am 31 years old, and I grew up in Atlanta, Georgia, in a house full of women. My mother, my grandmother, my two aunts who lived on the same street and came over every Sunday without fail, filling the house with food and opinions, and the particular loud love of Black Southern women who have decided that love is demonstrated through presence and volume. I grew up knowing I was held. I grew up knowing my worth. I grew up with my grandmother's hand in my hair and my mother's voice telling me that I was built for something, that the women in our family had always been built for something, that being a Carter meant being made of a material that did not easily break. And then I married Marcus Webb. I want to be very careful about how I tell this part, because the version that is easy to tell, the version where I am naive and he is obviously monstrous from the beginning, is not the true version. And the true version matters because there are women watching this right now who are in the middle of it and need to hear the true version, not the comfortable one. The true version is: Marcus Webb was extraordinary at the beginning. Not just charming, extraordinary. He was attentive in the specific way that feels. When you are 24 years old and have been waiting your whole life for someone to pay that quality of attention to you, like finally being seen. He remembered every detail. He showed up. He called when he said he would call and arrived when he said he would arrive, and looked at me in public the way that made other women notice and made me feel chosen, specifically and specially chosen, which is a feeling I now understand was the first part of the trap. We dated for 14 months. We were married on a Saturday in October, in my grandmother's backyard with the oak tree strung with lights and my mother crying and my aunts in their good dresses and every person I had ever loved in one place. And I stood under those lights in my dress and I thought, this is it. This is the thing I was built for. The first time he grabbed my wrist was 6 weeks after the wedding. We were in the kitchen. I had said something, I couldn't even tell you what, something small, some ordinary exchange of the kind that happens between two people sharing a life. And his hand closed around my wrist, and he looked at me with an expression I had never seen before on his face. An expression that contained none of the attentive warmth I had known for 14 months, and instead contained something cold and absolute and evaluating, and he said, "Don't say that again." I didn't say it again. I also told myself a story about it. The story went, he was stressed. The story went, he didn't mean it. The story went, every relationship has moments of friction, and this was ours and it would pass. I had watched enough movies and read enough books and absorbed enough of the cultural narrative that told me relationships required work and love required patience. and that the person who left too easily was the person who hadn't tried hard enough. And I applied all of that narrative to what had happened in my kitchen on a Tuesday night, and I filed it away, and I moved on. This is the thing about the beginning. The wrist one Tuesday is just the wrist one Tuesday. It's not the pattern yet. The pattern is what it becomes over time. The accumulation, the escalation, the way each incident makes the next one make sense, because by the time the next one comes, you have already constructed an architecture of justification that can hold increasingly heavy things. By year one, I had learned to monitor his moods the way a meteorologist monitors weather systems, reading the signs, anticipating the pressure changes, adjusting my behavior to try to prevent the storms. By year two, I had stopped calling my mother as often, because the calls required a performance of normalcy that was exhausting, and also because my mother was the woman who had told me I was built for something, and I was afraid of what she would see if she looked closely enough. By year three, I had become so comprehensively rearranged by the process of surviving Marcus Webb that the woman who had stood under the oak tree in her grandmother's backyard felt like someone I had read about in a book a long time ago. The night I left, he had both hands on my throat. Not one, both. And something happened in me during that particular incident, something that I can only describe as a system shutting down and restarting. Because when he finally stepped back and I was still standing, still breathing, still present in my own body, though barely. I walked to the bedroom and I picked up the bag that I had packed 3 months ago and hidden under the winter coats in the back of the closet, and I walked out the front door, and I did not stop walking. I drove to my mother's house. It was 2:47 in the morning. She opened the door before I knocked, which meant she had been awake, which meant some part of her had always known, and when she saw my face, she made a sound that I have never heard a human being make before or since, a sound from somewhere below language, from the place where all the things a mother feels for her child live when words aren't adequate. She held me for a very long time. "I'm here," she said. "You're here. You're okay." I was not okay, but I was there. And for the first time in 3 years, there was enough. The divorce took 11 months. Marcus did not want a divorce. This is important to understand, not because his wanting mattered, legally or morally, but because it shaped the 11 months in ways that I need to tell you about, because those 11 months were their own kind of survival, different from the survival inside the marriage, but just as demanding. He contested everything. Not because he wanted the things he was contesting, not the furniture, not the joint accounts that had mostly his money in them anyway, not the lease on the apartment I had already vacated. He contested them because contesting them kept him in contact with me, and keeping him in contact with me was the goal, because Marcus Webb's primary need was control, and the divorce was the removal of his primary means of exercising it. My lawyer was a woman named Patricia Ockhafer, who was small and precise and spoke in sentences that had no wasted words, and she looked at Marcus's legal strategy with the expression of someone who has seen this particular game many times and finds it tedious rather than alarming. "He's trying to wear you down," she told me. "He wants you to settle for less than you're owed because you're exhausted, We're not going to let that happen. We didn't let it happen. But it cost. It cost money I borrowed from my mother and time I spent in lawyers' offices instead of rebuilding my life and emotional resources that I did not have in surplus. By the time the divorce was finalized, I was 30 years old, living in a rented apartment in a neighborhood I didn't know well, working a job I had taken because it was available rather than because it was right, and I was functional. I was standing. I was not the woman in the yellow sundress feeling cautiously okay. That was still a year away. The year between the divorce and the festival was the year of reconstruction. I went back to therapy. I had been in therapy before, during the marriage, a fact Marcus had used against me regularly, as though needing to talk to a professional about the experience of being married to him was evidence of my instability rather than his. Now I went freely, twice a week, and I told my therapist, Dr. Angela Webb, different Webb, terrible coincidence, everything. And Dr. Angela Webb listened and reflected and gently, persistently dismantled the architecture of justification I had built over 3 years and helped me see its pieces for what they were. I started running. Not for fitness, though that happened too, but because I needed something that was entirely mine, entirely physical, that used my body for something good. I ran 3 miles every morning in the early light, and at the end of the 3 miles I was breathing hard, and my legs were solid under me and my body was mine. This body that had been grabbed and gripped and weaponized against me was mine, performing for me, carrying me forward, and that was worth more than I can tell you. I made friends. Carefully, because the isolation of the marriage had made me rusty at friendship, had made me feel like I had nothing to offer that wasn't already in deficit. But I made them. My neighbor Destiny, who knocked on my door 3 weeks after I moved in with a plate of food and the absolute certainty of someone who has decided she is going to be your friend whether you like it or not. My coworker James, who was funny in the specific way that makes the days lighter without you noticing. Small rebuildings, slow ones, real ones. By the time August came around, by the time the city festival was being advertised on every streetlight, and Destiny was pulling me out of my apartment with the energy of a woman who has decided I had been inside long enough. I was, cautiously, provisionally, not taking it for granted okay. You know what happened next. We're back at the festival. We're back at the hand around the throat. We're back at the man removing his rings. But I need you to understand something before we go forward. This story is about to become something neither Simone nor the man removing his rings expected. Subscribe right now if you haven't. Tell us your name and your city in the comments. We are building something here together, and every person who shows up matters. Now, pay attention, because what happens in the next 5 minutes of that festival is going to change everything. Marcus's hand dropped from my throat. He looked at the man to my left. The man looked back at him. The rings were in his breast pocket. His hands were open at his sides, which is somehow more communicative of capability than fists would have been. Fists are performance, open hands are readiness. "Who are you?" Marcus said. The man didn't answer. He stepped forward 1 step, measured, deliberate, and positioned himself between Marcus and me. Not in front of me exactly. Beside me, angled so that he was between Marcus and my body, but I was not behind him. I was not hidden. He was not rescuing me exactly. He was redistributing the geometry, changing what the situation was. "Walk away," the man said. His voice was low and even and accented with something I couldn't immediately place, and it contained zero performance. No aggression, no bravado. The specific tone of someone who is stating what will happen rather than requesting what they hope will happen. Marcus laughed. It was the laugh I knew, the laugh that meant he had assessed a situation and found it amusing because he believed his assessment was correct, and his assessment was that he was the most dangerous thing in any room he entered. "This your new man?" he said, looking at me around the man's shoulder. "This who you left me for?" "She didn't leave you for anyone," the man said. "She left you because you put your hands on her. Walk away." Something moved across Marcus's face. The assessment was recalibrating. He was looking at the man, at the height, the stillness, the quality of the attention being directed at him, the hands that were open and ready, and his laugh was fading, the way a sound fades when the room it's in changes acoustics. "Man, I don't know who you think you are. I know who I am," the man said. "The question is whether you're going to make a decision in the next few seconds that you'll regret significantly." A pause. "Walk away." The crowd around us had rearranged itself into a wider circle. Destiny was somewhere behind me. I could hear her voice, calling my name, coming closer. The festival music was still playing, something incongruously cheerful, and the children were still on the bouncy castle somewhere, and the lights were still strung between the oak trees, and Marcus Webb was standing in front of me doing the calculation that every bully eventually has to do when he encounters something he can't immediately categorize as less than himself. He looked at me one more time, and in his eyes was the thing I had lived with for 3 years, the ownership, the anger, the specific fury of a man whose object has developed the audacity to exist outside his possession. And then, for the first time in my experience of him, he looked away first. He walked. I watched him go. I watched his back move through the crowd, watched the crowd part for him the way it always did, because Marcus moved through spaces with the confident force of a man who expected to be accommodated. And then he was gone, swallowed by the festival crowd and the August evening and the distance that was the first distance between us in 3 years that was not managed by lawyers and paperwork, but was just physical space, real space, him leaving because he chose to rather than because a legal document required it. I became aware that I was shaking. Not visibly, I don't think. I have my mother's and my grandmother's blood in me, and the women in my family do not shake visibly in public if they can help it, but internally. The specific internal trembling that happens when adrenaline has nowhere to go. The man turned to look at me. Up close, he was, I registered this the way you register things after a crisis, with the particular clarity of a nervous system that has just been through something and is now taking inventory. He was Korean, early 30s, with dark eyes that were very direct and a jaw that was very still and a quality of attention, even now in the aftermath, that was completely present. He was not looking past me or around me. He was looking at me. "Are you hurt?" he said. "No," I said. My voice was steadier than I expected. "He's touched your throat before," he said. Not a question, I looked at him. "How do you know that?" "The way you went still when he grabbed you," he said. Not the stillness of someone experiencing something for the first time, the stillness of someone who has been trained by repetition to go still. He paused. I'm sorry that's true. Destiny arrived, out of breath, her hand on my arm. Simone, oh my God, are you okay? Who is that? She was looking at the man. I don't know, I said. I looked at him. Who are you? Park Yi-in, he said. He reached into his breast pocket and retrieved his rings, which he began replacing on his fingers with the same deliberate care with which he had removed them. Are you here with people? My friend, I said, gesturing to Destiny. Good. He looked at Destiny. Don't let her be alone tonight. He'll be watching to see if she's alone. Back to me. He'll come back. Maybe not tonight, but he'll come back. I know, I said. He nodded. He seemed to decide something. He reached into his other pocket, and I noticed, in the way I was noticing everything in the specific bright clarity of aftermath, that there were two other men standing at a respectful distance nearby who had not been there before he positioned himself between Marcus and me, who had appeared with the efficiency of people who appear when called though no call was visible, and he produced a card. He held it out to me. If he comes back, he said. A call. I took the card, I looked at it. Heavy stock. His name in clean type, a number I looked up. Why? I said. You don't know me. He looked at me for a moment. I know what I saw, he said, and then, quietly, no one should have to go still like that. He walked away. His two associates fell into step around him at their respectful distance, and the crowd rearranged again, and then he was gone the way he had arrived, with the complete certainty of someone who knows exactly where they are at all times. Destiny was staring at the space where he had been. Simone, she said, who was that man? I genuinely don't know, I said. But I was holding his card, and my hands had stopped shaking, and the August evening was still beautiful, and the lights were still strung between the oak trees, and something had just happened that I did not yet have a name for. I did not call the number that night, or the next day. I told myself I didn't need to, which was partially true. I told myself it was strange, which was entirely true. I told myself that accepting help from a stranger who had appeared and disappeared at a festival like a very well-dressed plot device was not a responsible foundation for anything, which was also true. What was also true, Marcus came back. Not to the festival was over by then. He came to my apartment building 4 days later and rang my buzzer 6 times at 11 p.m. I didn't answer. He called my phone 14 times. I didn't answer. He texted a series of messages that began with something that was architecturally an apology but was constructed as an accusation, because Marcus had always been brilliant at this, at building apologies that somehow transferred the blame to the recipient, and I read them and did not respond and called my lawyer in the morning. My lawyer filed. The restraining order process began. It would take time. These things always took time, and in the meantime, I was in my apartment doing the mental calculation that women in this situation do. The calculation that has too many variables and not enough certainty. And on the 5th day, I took Park Yi-in's card out of the drawer where I had put it, and I looked at it for a long time. I called Destiny instead. I told her about the buzzer, the calls, the texts. She was silent for a moment, and then she said, "Call the man from the festival." "I don't know him, Destiny." "You don't know your ex-husband either," she said. Not the real version, but you know what that man did at the festival. You know what it cost him nothing to do. It cost him nothing because he's clearly, I stopped. Clearly what? The rings, I said. The men who appeared, the way he talked to Marcus. He's not an ordinary person, Destiny. Marcus is not an ordinary danger, she said. Call him. I called him. He answered on the second ring. Simone Carter, he said, which was alarming because I hadn't told him my last name, and then I remembered I had, and then I remembered that even if I hadn't, he probably would have found it anyway, because he was whatever he was. He came back, I said. My apartment 4 nights ago. I know, he said. I went very still. What do you mean you know? I had someone watching your building, he said. After the festival, I was concerned he would reappear. You had someone watching my building, I repeated. Yes. Without telling me. Yes. A pause. I understand that's alarming, I said. That's alarming. Yes, he said. I understand. I would like to explain if you're willing to hear it. In person, if possible. Somewhere public, somewhere you feel safe. I thought about the festival. I thought about the rings coming off one by one. I thought about the specific quality of his stillness and the way he had positioned himself not in front of me but beside me, angled so that I was not hidden. I thought about what he had said. No one should have to go still like that. Coffee, I said. Public place. Daytime. Of course, he said. We met at a coffee shop on a Saturday morning. He was already there when I arrived, of course he was, and he was in a different configuration than the festival. No dark shirt, no rolled sleeves, just a simple navy sweater and jeans and the rings, which were present on his fingers, and which I looked at and thought about in a way I hadn't expected to think about rings. I sat down. He had already ordered coffee for me, not presumptuous. He had texted to ask my order 20 minutes before, which was its own kind of attention. Tell me who you are, I said, no preamble. I had spent the car ride deciding not to perform social ease. He told me. The version he told was honest in the way I was beginning to understand was his specific variety of honesty, complete within its selected boundaries, not false anywhere but bounded. His name was Park Yi-in. He ran a business organization in the city, several businesses, some straightforward, some less so. He was 34 years old. He had grown up in Busan, South Korea, come to the United States at 22 with a specific goal, and had spent 12 years achieving it, and was now in the particular position of a man who had built everything he intended to build, and was in the process of discovering that everything he had intended to build was not the same as everything he needed. Why were you at the festival? I asked. A business contact. There was a meeting scheduled at the venue across the street. He paused. I saw you before he grabbed you. I looked at him. How before? 20 minutes approximately. You were at the lemonade stand. You were, he stopped. Considered. You were watching the lights, the ones strung between the trees, and you had the expression of someone who has recently remembered what it feels like to be at peace and is being careful with that feeling, like it might be fragile. The coffee shop was warm and busy around us, and I sat with what he had just described, which was the most accurate description of my internal state at any given moment of the past year that anyone had ever offered me, including my therapist. And then he grabbed you, Yi-in said, and the expression disappeared, and something else came in that I recognized, What did you recognize? Training, he said. The trained stillness of someone who has learned that stillness is survival. I have seen this before in people I have been too late to help. He was quiet. I was not too late this time. I looked at my coffee. I looked at the rings on his fingers. You removed your rings, I said. Yes. Why, before anything happened, before you even spoke to him, you removed them. He was quiet for a moment. Because men like the one who had his hand on your throat respond to signals. Signals of status, of hierarchy, of capability. The rings they mean something in certain contexts. Removing them publicly, deliberately in front of him, communicated something he understood without me having to say it. He paused, and because I did not want to hurt him with them on. The last sentence landed quietly. But you were prepared to hurt him, I said. If necessary, he said. Yes, with your hands. It would not have been the first time, he said, with the specific neutrality of someone stating a biographical fact. I sat with all of this. I was sitting across from a man who was, by any reasonable measure, himself dangerous. A man who traveled with associates who appeared without being called, who had someone watching my building without my knowledge, who removed rings before a confrontation the way a person removes a watch before washing dishes, automatic, practiced, habitual. I was sitting across from this man and I was not afraid, which was itself information. The person watching my building, I said. I'll remove them if you prefer, he said. I should have told you. It was a decision made in a framework you didn't agree to, and that was wrong of me. Why did you do it? Because he is not done, he said. Men like him are not done when they walk away. They regroup. They wait. They come back when they think the geography has changed in their favor. He looked at me. I didn't want to not be there when he came back. You don't know me, I said. I know what I saw, he said for the second time. At the festival, you in the yellow dress watching the lights, and then what his hand did to your expression. He was looking at me with the direct, unperformed attention I was beginning to understand was his constant mode. I would like to know more if you're willing. I looked at him for a long time. You're complicated, I said. Very, he agreed. Your world is complicated. Extremely. And you think that's compatible with, I gestured at the space between us, the coffee cups, the Saturday morning normalcy of the coffee shop. I don't know, he said. I think it's worth finding out. I drank my coffee. I thought about Marcus, and I thought about 3 years, and I thought about the Reconstruction year, and Dr. Angela Webb, and the morning runs, and the 3 miles where my body was entirely mine. I thought about the woman in the yellow dress watching the lights and being careful with the feeling because it might be fragile. Tell me about your world, I said, all of it. He told me, stay with me, because this is where the story turns into something neither of them expected. This is where the Reconstruction year meets the complication and both of them have to decide what they're made of. Subscribe, drop your city, share this with one person who needs it. Now, back to Simone. Back to what came next. Over the following 6 weeks, I learned Park Yi in the way you learn a language you didn't grow up speaking, with effort and attention and the occasional complete failure of comprehension, followed by a breakthrough that makes the effort worthwhile. He was patient. This is the first thing, and the thing that disarmed me most, because patience from a man was something I had learned to distrust, having experienced Marcus's patience in the early months as a performance that concealed its opposite. But Yi In's patience was different in quality. It was not the patience of someone waiting for something. It was the patience of someone who is entirely comfortable with the pace things are moving because the pace things are moving is the right pace. Like he had somewhere specific to get to and was not in a hurry because he was confident in the direction. We had coffee 3 more times. Then dinner, his suggestion, mine the restaurant, somewhere I knew and felt safe in. He arrived first each time. He ordered nothing until I arrived. He put his phone face down on the table and did not look at it for the duration of the meal, which sounds like a small thing and was not a small thing at all. He asked about my life with the specificity of someone who is genuinely interested in the details. About growing up in Atlanta, about my grandmother's house, about the Sunday ants and the oak tree, and the wedding that had been the beginning of the wrong thing. He listened without performing listening. He asked follow-up questions that proved he had been paying attention. I asked about Busan, about coming to America at 22 with a goal and 12 years of achieving it. About what the goal was, which he told me in the careful, bounded way, a family organization that had needed rebuilding, debts that had needed paying, a structure that had needed a different architecture than the one he'd inherited. About what the 12 years had cost, which he also told me, in pieces and over time, the pieces fitting together into a picture that was complicated and not entirely comfortable, and also, in its honesty, more trustworthy than anything I had been told in the 3 years of my marriage. The restraining order against Marcus came through on a Wednesday. My lawyer called me and I sat in my car in the parking lot of my office building, and I held the phone after she hung up and I felt, not relief exactly, something more complicated. Because the legal document was real and also the legal document was paper, and paper does not stop a man like Marcus Webb, it just changes the legal consequences of what he does, and legal consequences require something to have already happened, which means they are not prevention but response, and I had spent 3 years responding. I called Yi in, not for any reason I had articulated to myself. I just called him. He answered immediately. Simone. The restraining order came through, I said. Good, he said. It's just paper, I said. I know. He doesn't care about paper. I know that too. A silence. I'm going to be okay, I said. Yes, he said. You are. You sound very certain. I am very certain, he said. And the certainty was not comfort certainty, not the empty reassurance that people offer when they don't know what else to give. It was something more solid and more specific, and I understood it without him having to explain it. He was certain because he intended to make it true. Marcus violated the restraining order in October. He appeared outside my gym at 6:45 in the morning, which meant he had been watching me long enough to know my schedule, which meant the watching had been going on for some time, which is the specific chill of realizing that the danger you know about has a dimension you hadn't mapped. He didn't touch me. He stood across the street and he looked at me and he smiled, which was worse than the hand around the throat in some ways because the smile meant he knew exactly what he was doing, and he had calculated that the smile by itself would not be sufficient for enforcement but would be entirely sufficient for its intended purpose. which was to remind me that he could find me, that the paper meant nothing, that the geography was still his. I took a photograph of him with my phone, standing across the street, smiling. I sent it to my lawyer. I sent it to Yi In. Yi In called within 30 seconds. "Are you inside?" he said. "Just walked back in. Stay inside, I'm sending someone." "You don't have to, Simone." The specific quality of his voice, not commanding, not overriding my autonomy, but present. Completely, entirely present. "Let me do this." I stayed inside. A man I had seen once before, one of the associates from the festival, I recognized the specific way he stood, appeared outside the gym within 12 minutes and remained there until Yi and himself arrived 40 minutes later. He came inside. He was in his work clothes, the suit, the rings, and he sat across from me at the small gym cafe table and looked at me with the full weight of his attention and said, "This has to end." "I know," I said. "Not the restraining order," he said. "Not more paper, him." I looked at him. "What does that mean? What are you going to do?" "Nothing illegal," he said, and the way he said it suggested that the illegal options had been considered and set aside, which was its own kind of information. "But there are people Marcus Webb answers to, business relationships, professional relationships. He works in commercial real estate. I know the people who employ him. I know the people who employ the people who employ him." He paused. "A man like Marcus Webb depends on social and professional credibility to operate. He depends on people believing his version of himself. And you can change what they believe," I said slowly. "I can ensure that the people in his professional world have access to the truth about who he is," he said. "The police reports, the photographs, the restraining order, the documented pattern." He looked at me. "This is your choice, Simone, not mine. I will do nothing without your full consent." I thought about it. I thought about the wrist on a Tuesday in my kitchen 6 weeks after my wedding. I thought about the architecture of justification I had built over 3 years to hold the increasingly heavy things. I thought about the both hands on my throat night and the bag under the winter coats and my mother's door at 2:47 a.m. and the sound she made. I thought about 11 months of contested divorce and the reconstruction year and the morning runs and the carefully held peace at the festival and the hand that had taken it. "Do it," I said. He did it. I don't know the full details of what happened. I know that within 3 weeks of that conversation, Marcus Webb was terminated from his position. I know that the termination was followed by an investigation into certain financial practices that had apparently been known about and quietly tolerated by his employer, and were now, suddenly and comprehensively, not being tolerated. I know that the investigation produced findings that were referred to relevant authorities. I know that within 6 weeks of the photograph outside my gym, Marcus Webb's carefully constructed social and professional world, the world that had maintained his version of himself, the charming, successful man who was certainly not the person his ex-wife had described, began to come apart. I learned some of this from my lawyer, who called me with updates that she seemed to find professionally satisfying. I learned some of it from Destiny, who had a friend who had a colleague in Marcus's building, which is how information travels in the specific way it travels. I learned some of it from Yi In, who told me what he could in the bounded, honest way he told me everything. What I felt when I learned, it was not the triumphant vindication of movies and story. It was something quieter and more complicated, a slow unwinding, like a knot that has been held tight for so long that the loosening takes time and is not entirely comfortable. Relief. And underneath the relief, something that I had to sit with my therapist to properly identify. It was grief. For the woman who had stood under the oak tree and believed she was beginning something beautiful. For the 14 months of what had felt like being chosen. For the version of Marcus Webb that had never actually existed, but that I had loved with everything I had. It's okay to grieve him, Dr. Angela Webb told me. You're not grieving him, you're grieving who you believed he was. That person deserves to be grieved. I grieved him, and then I stopped. Yi-In and I had been seeing each other, carefully, slowly, with the particular deliberateness of two people who are both, for different reasons, experienced in what happens when things move wrong for 4 months when the twist happened. I want to call it a twist, but that's not quite right. It was more like a reveal, something that had been true all along becoming visible. Like the moment your eyes adjust to a different light and you can see the full shape of something that was always there. His name came up in a conversation I was having with my cousin Deshawn, who worked in law enforcement. Not in connection with anything current, just a name that had appeared in certain contexts Deshawn was familiar with from his work. A name associated with a particular shift in the organization of certain criminal enterprises in the city. A shift that was notable because it was a movement toward legitimacy rather than away from it. Because the person leading the shift had made a strategic decision to consolidate and clean. And had been doing so for the past 3 years with an effectiveness that the people Deshawn worked with found simultaneously useful and confusing because it removed problems they had expected to have to solve themselves. Deshawn said the name, Park Yi-In. I went very quiet on the phone. "Why are you quiet?" Deshawn said. "Tell me more," I said. He told me more. Park Yi-In was known. Not wanted, his legal exposure was minimal and declining as the legitimization process continued, but known. Known as someone who had inherited a specific kind of organization and was in the process of transforming it. Known as someone whose methods, in the transformation process, occasionally included the kind of direct intervention that legal channels were too slow or too limited to achieve. Like ensuring that a man with a documented pattern of violence against women experienced comprehensive professional and social consequences for that pattern. I sat with what Deshawn had told me for the rest of the evening. I sat with it through dinner, which I cooked mechanically and ate without tasting. I sat with it through the phone call from my mother, which I answered with the performance of normalcy that I had gotten very good at and hated using. I sat with it until 11 p.m. and then I called Yi-In. "I spoke to my cousin today," I said. "Deshawn Carter. He works in law enforcement." A pause. "I see," he said. "He told me things about you." "What things?" "The things people in law enforcement know about Park Yi-In." I paused. "Is it true?" "Which part?" "All of it." "Then yes," he said, "all of it is true." I closed my eyes. "You should have told me." "Yes," he said, "I should have. That was a failure on my part. I told you the shape of it, the organization, the complexity, the movement toward legitimacy. I didn't tell you the specific history. A pause. I was afraid. You were afraid, I repeated. The man who removed his rings before a confrontation with Marcus Webb. Of what? Of what you would do with the full information, he said. Of losing the thing we're building before it had enough substance to survive the weight of the truth. Another pause, which is not a justification. It's an explanation. The justification doesn't exist. I sat with that. He had told me every time that he would be honest. He had been honest within boundaries he had set unilaterally. He had told me the shape and withheld the specific history, and the difference between those two things was it was significant. I need to think, I said. I know, he said. I'm not making a decision tonight. I'm not asking for one, he said. Take whatever time you need, I'll be here. I thought for 4 days. I thought about Marcus, who had been dishonest about everything and whose dishonesty had been in the service of concealing what he was so that he could continue doing it. I thought about Yi-In, whose bounded honesty had been in the service of what? Of protecting the thing we were building from a weight he was afraid it couldn't bear. 2 kinds of dishonesty, entirely different in their direction and their purpose. I thought about the festival. I thought about the rings. I thought about the 20 minutes before Marcus grabbed me, when Yi-In had been watching me watch the lights and had seen something he recognized as peace and had remembered its value before I lost it again. I thought about what my therapist said, which was, the question isn't whether he's complicated. The question is whether his complications are in the service of your destruction or your protection. Those are very different things. On the 4th day, I called him. I'm angry, I said. I want you to know that. About the history you didn't tell me, I'm angry. That's fair, he said, and I'm not finished being angry about it. I understand. But I'm also, I stopped. I need you to promise me something. That the boundary of what you tell me is mine to set, not yours. You tell me what I ask for. You don't decide for me what I can handle. A silence. Yes, he said. I promise. Then I want to see you, I said, and I want you to tell me the rest of it, all of it, and I'll decide from there. Okay, he said. And his voice held something that I recognized as the specific sound of someone who has been afraid of a particular outcome and is feeling the outcome resolve differently than the fear predicted. We met. He told me the rest of it. All of it, the inherited organization, the decisions made at 22, the years of navigating a world with a specific set of rules, the 3 years of deliberate movement toward a different architecture. The things he had done that he was not proud of. The things he had done that he believed were necessary. The line between those 2 categories, which was not always as clear as he would have liked. I listened. I asked questions. He answered them. At the end, I said, the thing at the festival, the rings, Marcus, did you do that because of who you are? Because of the world you operate in and the habit of direct intervention? He thought about this carefully. Partly, he said. The capability comes from that world, yes. But the decision to stand up, to walk over, to put myself between him and you, he paused. That came from something else, something I don't operate in a world for, something that was just a person seeing another person and deciding that what was happening was wrong and that the capability to stop it, used for that purpose, was the right use of it. I looked at him. You were late to something, I said. Your associate meeting. The one across the street from the festival. Yes. You stayed for 40 minutes. Yes. Because you were watching me watch the lights. A pause. Yes. I stopped. I thought about my grandmother and what she would say about a man who watched a stranger be at peace for 40 minutes because the peace was worth watching. I thought about what my mother would say. I thought about what Dr. Angela Webb would say, which was probably something about the complexity of human goodness and the way it exists in the same people as human failure. That's the most honest thing anyone has ever done for me, I said, without knowing they were doing it. He looked at me, and on his face was something I had not seen there before, not the controlled attention, not the directness, not the patient stillness. Something underneath all of those, something that required none of those defenses. I want to do honest things for you, he said. With your knowledge, with your consent, for as long as you'll let me. I thought about the oak tree and the lights and the woman who had stood under them and believed she was beginning something beautiful. I thought about the reconstruction and the morning runs and the cautious provisional peace. I thought about the yellow dress and the lemonade and the hand that had taken the piece away and the hand that had come off the throat because of the rings. Then start, I said. What I know now, standing on the other side of all of it. Survival is not a one-time event. It is not the night you leave with the bag from under the winter coats. It is not the restraining order or the divorce finalization or the year of reconstruction. Survival is a practice. It is the morning run and the therapy appointment and the friend who brings food to your door and the decision, made daily and sometimes hourly, to remain in your own life rather than be removed from it by the person who taught you that removal was love. The man who grabs your throat is not the most dangerous thing. The most dangerous thing is the story you tell yourself afterward, the architecture of justification, the weight of which you carry alone because you have been convinced that carrying it is your responsibility, that the weight is evidence of your inadequacy rather than his cruelty. The most dangerous thing is the silence. I am not silent anymore. Park Yi-in is complicated. His world is complicated. There are things about it I am still learning and things about it that are genuinely hard and things I have had to decide on an ongoing basis whether I can hold. The answer, so far, has been yes, not because the complications have disappeared, but because the man inside them is someone I trust, which is a word I had stopped using in the context of men and which I am learning, carefully, to use again. He removed his rings at a festival because he saw a woman going still in a way that told him everything and he decided to stand up. That is not nothing. In a crowd full of people who rearranged themselves into bystanders, it is not nothing. It is, in fact, everything. My grandmother always said, "Judge a person by what they do when it costs them something." Yi-in was late to his meeting. He stood between a stranger and her danger. He placed his rings in his pocket, and he put his body in the space that needed a body, and he said, "Walk away." He costs himself things for the right reasons. I am learning to do the same. Marcus Webb was arrested in November on the financial charges. The trial is pending. I don't spend time thinking about it. He is not where my attention lives anymore, and redirecting my attention from him back to my own life is a victory I claim daily, because attention is a resource, and for too long I gave all of mine to managing his existence rather than building my own. I called my mother on a Sunday in December and I told her about Yi In. Not all of it, the full picture will come in layers as it has come to me, but enough. She was quiet for a moment and then she said, "Baby, does he see you?" I thought about 40 minutes at a festival. I thought about a man watching me watch the lights and registering something worth protecting before I had registered it myself. "Yes," I said, "he sees me." "Then," my mother said, "that's where we start." That is Simone's story, all of it, or the beginning of the next part of it, because the best stories don't end. They turn into the next chapter, which is the one where the surviving becomes the living. If this story reached you, if any part of it sounded like something you've carried or are carrying, please know that you are not alone in this room. This channel exists for exactly these stories, the ones that tell the truth about what survival costs and what it builds and who shows up in the unexpected moments. Subscribe right now. Hit the bell so you never miss a story. And please, drop your name and your city in the comments below. We want to know who is in this room with us. People are watching from Atlanta and Los Angeles and Chicago and London and Lagos and Seoul and everywhere in between. And every single name in those comments is a reminder that none of us are going through this alone. Share this video with one person who needs to hear that surviving is the beginning, not the end. And tomorrow, we are bringing you the story of a woman who discovered at her own mother's funeral that the man seated in the front row as her father was not her biological father, and that the man she had called her uncle her entire life was. What the letter her mother left told her. What she did with the truth. What it cost her and what it gave her. We're calling it. She read the letter at the graveside, and the man she called uncle couldn't look her in the eye. Set your reminder. You need to be here for it. Thank you for watching. Thank you for staying. And to every woman who has ever had to go still to survive, your stillness was strength. And you are allowed now to move.